an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Travelers, Season 2, Episode 6, U235. In this episode, the faction seems to be one step ahead of our team no matter what they do. I want to know exactly how they're getting their information. I feel like it's not just as simple as, well, we figured you'd do that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. I do not believe that Michael is in the chat, but Ms. T is in the chat. So I have some company here. And I am glad I do, because I have to be honest with you guys. I am not entirely sure what happened in this episode. And I went back and rewatched some portions of it. I didn't rewatch the whole thing because I didn't really feel like that was necessary. But basically, what the team does is they get a source of energy to power the director into a position that will help bring it back online. And I don't understand how, where it was put in this compound worked out, and why, like, the whole way that goes, and the logistics of it was plutonium in the end, right? The plutonium gets left in this like dedicated spot by Trevor at the end of the episode. And we find out that this indeed worked, and it helped bring the director back online for 3 seconds, which was just enough for it to like fix a bunch of the, basically overtake the bodies of some of the bodies that were taken by the faction, and also transmit a cure for the virus that was created. But I don't understand how that worked. So, Ms. T, no pressure, but you are the only one in the chat. And if you have an explanation that breaks it down in very simple terms for a dodo bird like me to understand, I would definitely welcome that. I'm absolutely willing to accept that this worked. I just would like to understand it a little bit better. The show doesn't tend to do the kind of hand-wavy stuff regarding like time travel the way that something like Doctor Who would do, where they're just like, I don't know, that somebody found it was fine. So I feel like I missed something. And I even, at the time when they were describing how they could fix this, I didn't really understand it when it was being explained the first time. So I sort of continued watching after stopping and rewinding and re-listening to the explanation. I was sort of like, maybe watching, it will make sense once I see it in action. But then you don't really see it in action because they never really show the future, right? They don't show what happens there with those people. And I'm not entirely clear that what happened with this plutonium even occurred in the future. Did it? Was it? Because the director isn't in that facility yet when they bring the plutonium there. It's simply where the director will be built eventually. So, did they somehow manage to convey a message to the future about where the plutonium will be when they need it? That it'll be buried in this sort of secret, strange place that nobody would think to look for it, that they can go and get it? Anyway, I apologize for my ignorance on this because I really wanted to go and research the answer, but you know how that is. Like, there's no way to look up something that specific about a show like this and not get spoiled somehow. So I just didn't want to risk doing that. And I truly did feel like a bit of a dunce, but what can you do? But I'm getting ahead of myself here because that's way later. The beginning of this episode, reminder, the last episode dealt entirely with the virus spreading, the reveal that the faction was behind it, that they are interested in diminishing the number of people on the earth in order to... Their goal is allegedly there is too high a population for the number of resources, and by reducing the sheer population, we are going to be helping to prolong the life of the earth, and we will be ensuring that things like global warming are slowed down, etc. I'm going to say what I said last time, and it's an unfortunate thing that the show fell into this trap here, but I didn't totally go into it last ep because it just didn't feel worth it. But you know what? I got time today, so I'm going to do it, and y'all are just going to have to, just, you know what's coming, okay? So just, I'm sorry, but I have to say it. So the whole thing about how the world is overpopulated, and that's why resources are dwindling, and we're filling everything up with garbage, and global warming because of emissions, and et cetera, et cetera. That is a myth. All of that is not happening because of overpopulation. All of that is happening because of capitalism. The population isn't the ones, at large. They are not responsible for what's happening. We are continuing to use really inefficient means of extracting fossil fuels, like fracking, which do enormous damage to the environment. We are continuing to use fossil fuels at all when it is 2020. We should not be continuing to use them. But so many people have their wealth tied up in that, they have ensured we are still reliant on them. There isn't a single aspect of the climate crisis that isn't propped up and supported by millionaires and billionaires who don't want to lose money. And so, this idea that the faction has, that eliminating a massive portion of the population will help with the resource issue, is hugely flawed. And also, we never want to talk about this either, racist and classist, because whenever people talk about overpopulation, they never ever talk about the United States and overpopulation. They talk about other countries, third world countries or developing countries, and the fact that there are way too many people who don't use birth control or condoms or whatever. It's always couched in dog whistles. It's always just hinted at suburban racism, as I heard it called recently. But it all boils down to the same thing, which is white people get worried when brown people have too many babies. And all of a sudden it becomes a population issue. And that's not it at all. And never mind the fact that sex education is very tightly controlled, and so is contraception and access to abortion. And if you were truly worried about overpopulation, you would make those things available to people of low income. But you don't. For reasons. And then when we talk about the actual, fact that the people who are going to be infected with this virus are going to, the ones that die are going to be those, again, without access to healthcare, without access oftentimes to safe places to go or ways to get out of exposed areas, you are looking at a mass amount of casualties from the poor, and oftentimes those who are not white, those who are not abled. It's the same thing that we are seeing now with COVID. The vast majority of COVID deaths were people of color. That's just what happened, and you can go and look it up. And partially that is due to lack of access, and partially that is due to ingrained racism in the healthcare industry, which is well documented. And so I feel like this show did something that I was unintentionally exactly right by having that guy, I think his name was Bob, that Dave is talking to when David's like serving food at that shelter. There's a black man who falls victim and winds up sort of going into a coma, it seems like. And this dude is a perfect example of the kind of person that would actually be left behind and has actually been left behind by our country. And I don't know that the show did that on purpose, because I feel like if they did, they wouldn't be approaching this the way that they are. The issue for me isn't so much simply that the assumption that cutting down on the population will be effective, although that is massively problematic. It's a widely enough blindly accepted premise that I could even sort of see the faction believing that. But it's more the fact that nobody really calls them out on it or says anything to them about how incorrect that is, or asserts that the actual segment of the population that will be most at risk are the underprivileged already, and how like massively fucked up that is. It's the kind of thing that I actually kind of said something about this. There was a post a while back when the whole thing with COVID began to happen and people began quarantining, and we started to see the resurgence of wildlife in certain areas that were more urban, due almost entirely to the fact that people had pulled back and nature began almost immediately to start to take over again. And there were a lot of people who were talking about how, humanity is a disease, and, the fact that COVID is like killing us off is actually a blessing for the earth. And it's like, I understand your mindset there, but you are not keeping at the forefront of these assertions the very real impact that your words are having when you are saying, oh, good, kill off people because we suck. You're not keeping in mind the people that are dying are the people who are already at risk. They're people who are disabled. They are people who already have health problems, who are elderly. And you are basically celebrating the fact that they are dying. And that's a fucked up look. I can understand, in theory, being like, I would like for the earth to be able to heal itself and take back some of what we have stolen and ruined. But that's not happening in a vacuum, and that's not happening equally across all class systems and races. So I just wanted to talk about that because I was waiting for somebody to say something to contradict what Jenny keeps repeating that was more than simply, well, you don't get to decide that. Because she kept saying, we're killing a third of the population in order to save everybody. And nobody is like, yeah, but what third, though? Who gets to stay alive? You're not doing this like, you aren't going to, country clubs and infecting the super rich as well. You guys were in like regular public spaces with a lot of unprotected, marginalized people. And what really kills me is that when you see something like this and they're talking about like saving resources, you know what would be the best use of the resources that you guys have access to is evening out the playing field by hacking into people's bank accounts and taking some of these billionaires' money and spreading it out amongst poor people, or canceling student loan debt and allowing people to like maybe release some plans that are for solar cell vehicles and create some things that are actually meant to be a help to the population at large, and actually throwing a wrench in the overall system of capitalism that causes us to have these cycles of just perpetual greed and destruction and consuming of resources. Do that. Fuck up a whole, like, vote for fracking in a certain area. Ruin all of their equipment. Like, write something into a bill that is about to be signed without ever being read, where you protect a massive area of wildlife. Do anything that actually has to do with what systemically is wrong, rather than going after the general public, who really, when you get down to it, have very little to do with how the world moves and shakes. The overall decision-making process for our planet is, there's like 20 people involved, and the rest of us just happen to also be here. And it's an unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. And I'd really like to see that get shaken up. Hack some fucking elections, guys. Go ahead. You know, I feel like we keep trying to do these small things. And now that I'm in the year of our COVID 2020, I just don't see, if you're coming from the past, you have access to amazing, like, options with health. You can hack into, like, apparently any fucking computer system. I don't have a lot of patience for these, like, small potatoes and, like, bits and pieces of action anymore. I want them to do more and to be a little more willing to really shake shit up. I don't know what the overall consequences would be if they began doing that sort of thing, but I would be willing to take the risk in comparison to what it is that we actually see going on. So, forgive me, because I took up a whole quarter of my time talking about that, but it's really important, and it's something that I think a lot of people either don't understand or choose not to think about because it's so ingrained in us, especially for Americans, that the at-risk groups don't matter. The only people who are really at risk of dying from COVID are people who are already sick or who are elderly or disabled in some way. And, well, what can you do? And it's really treated like it's not, like, that's such a foregone conclusion that it's not even worth mentioning. And I really hoped for a while this episode that was going to come up, because Jenny keeps talking about, like, you know, for everybody's good. And I wanted somebody to be like, do you really think that the world died because there were just too many of us? We throw thousands and thousands of tons of food away every single week, and we have more than we can use of many resources, actually. But we choose to parcel them out because of capitalism, not because there's not enough to go around. There's absolutely enough to go around. There's absolutely enough. Just figure out a way to fix that part, and maybe things wouldn't, like, wind up where they do. It's part of why also when we get into, like, post-apocalyptic stuff and talking about, like, The Walking Dead, for example. And, well, you know what? I took up too much time. I'm not going to get all into that. But I don't think it would be as bad as we think, because capitalism would be mostly dismantled. And honestly, for me, that's the biggest threat and the thing that will cause us to just crumple as a society. So, with that said, Now I'll actually talk about the episode specifically. So Jenny is dying. Carly pulls her gun on Jenny, and Jenny's basically like, that's fine, kill me. That's what I want anyway. Which we know, because she took pills, and later on Philip confronts her about that, and demands why she took the pills in the first place. He suggests maybe it was guilt, to which she assures him, no, I feel no guilt whatsoever. I just know that this disease is really fucking ugly at the end, and I don't want to go through that. And she tries to beg him to, like, help put her out of her misery, saying she doesn't want to go through it. And I'm just like, you know that he's not on your side, and you're trying to put the whole rest of the world through this, but spare yourself. Do you really think that he is going to actually be helpful to you in this endeavor? Is that how you think that's going to go? Because, Jenny, you have no idea who this guy is. And I have to say that the actress who plays Jenny she's got that quality that you just want to slap her. You know, she's just like, there's something about her. She's got a very, like, bratty, sort of petulant face. And especially this episode, the number of times that she's, like, arguing with them in this way, I just lost my patience with her so entirely. Remind me, anybody, if you can, what the name is of the woman who used to be, it's been a while since I covered one of these, so forgive me, who used to be the guidance counselor at Trevor's school. But she is particularly insufferable this episode. And it's kind of funny because she keeps sort of insisting that the reason Marcy isn't taking care of her is because Marcy secretly hates her. And I'm like, man, if she didn't at the start of this whole thing, she sure fucking does now. You really did not help your case at all, dude. Because Marcy is so much more patient than I would have been. I would have locked that bitch to a bed and told her to just shut the fuck up. I would have done the exact same shit that they do to Jenny, because I was ready to, like, hit the roof by the end of this thing. But anyway, they're arguing about the whole thing with, like, the director and the fact that McLaren had been going to swing an axe and shut the whole thing down, and that he didn't do that. And that, you know, the fact that he didn't, like, they were basically, like, following blindly. And Jenny was saying that you guys follow it blindly, and that's the difference between us. McLaren replies, no, the faction abducts innocent people and overwrites them. That's the difference between us. And she says, oh, opportunism taking hosts just before they die is so fucking ethical. And I love Marcy's response of, yeah, that's exactly what it is. I really appreciated that, because there's like this moment here that I thought the show was going to try and act like she really did have a point. And I liked that she gets slapped down right away, because I was worried that, oh, are we going to have to pretend that maybe she has something here? But no, I think that there's a very clear delineation. Jenny says something about how, well, everybody's going to die, some sooner than others. And I'm just like, if that's the way that you feel, then who cares if you guys save the world or not? Either everybody just deserves to die whenever you decide, or they don't. And there's no in between there. You don't get to decide, well, I get to decide everybody from this timeline dies, like, right away, but the people from my timeline are going to be saved because of what I do here. Well, no, dude. Just everybody's going to die, so who cares what we do? Is not an argument. That's nothing. That's you just floundering and sounding like a fucking schmuck. And you know you sound like a fucking schmuck. And she says, like, for what they did to this planet, good riddance. And I'm like, yeah, that's really at the heart of it more than anything. Y'all are angry at people in the past, and you're trying to get some sort of weird, demented revenge that you've convinced yourself is actually proactive. And it's not. It wouldn't help. I firmly believe were this plan to have worked and a third of the population actually were to die, I think precisely nothing would change at all. I just don't, like, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I truly believe everything would mostly keep grinding along the way it always has, because we love nothing more than to try and cling to routine and the familiar. And a third of the population of the planet being wiped off the map, there is no greater reason to try and cling to what you have right now for dear life than something like that happening. So, in my opinion, if anything, doing something like this is just a great way to keep shit exactly on course. And especially considering what we've seen with, like, COVID this year, almost nobody has really changed their behavior in a permanent way. There are some businesses that are choosing to allow people to telecommute and work from home, and that is the minority. Most brick and mortar stores are reopened fully. Most restaurants have reopened fully. Most people are making plans to get together for Thanksgiving and Christmas as if nothing has happened. It is astonishing how much we are willing to ignore the data that shows cases beginning to climb again in the face of doing things that comfort us and make us feel good in the moment. And I just don't buy that their little plan here was well thought out or considered or effective in any way, shape, or form. I wish I did a little bit. I wish I was a little bit more on their side, just for the question of having those sorts of conversations. But there's nothing about it that rings true to me at all. So McLaren tells her that we're going to hunt down every single member of the faction in the 21st. And she says, the director is shut down in the future and most of your team will be dead in less than 2 weeks. So good luck. And that's the end of the cold open. And then we go into the main conversation. So here's the thing, and I'm going to read this out loud, hoping that maybe by reading it, I can understand what I was saying in the beginning of the episode that, I failed to really grasp. Grace, that's her name, what Grace was saying. I'm saying the director can fix this. We need to fix the director. The director exists in the future and its reactors already shut down. Those are big problems, Grace. And she says the plan's already in place. When it became apparent that the grand plan would take longer than our initial projections, the director sent a team to refine uranium as fuel to extend its operational life. A few kilos would be enough. All we have to do is take the fuel to the location where the director will eventually be built, and it'll be there when the time comes, without the faction knowing. Okay, so what I said is essentially how it worked then. They just hid it, and somehow in the future, well, I guess they gave them the coordinates, right? Is probably what happened somehow. Here's my problem is I don't really know how much communication can come from the 21st to the future. I know that the future doesn't have a deep understanding of what's gone on in the 21st, in terms, because they only know history as it happened for their timeline, right? They don't know history as it was going to happen and what the director was responsible for changing, as far as I know. Or maybe they do. Maybe they have that on record. So how, let's see. Ms. T says the future made the plan. Grace knows the plan. Oh. But Grace didn't come up with this plan until after she went to the past. Oh, now we're getting into that time travel loop thingy where did something start? Because the future made the plan, but like how do they know specifically the spot that this is put to? Maybe it's just Grace knows like the drop off point, like they always use the exact same hiding spot. Is that what you mean, Miss T? So it's just basically like we already had the coordinates and you just put it over there. Which, if that's true, why wouldn't the faction know the coordinates also? Ms. T says the future knows where the director will be built. I mean, yeah, they know where the director will be built, but it sounds like she's saying you hide the fuel source in somewhere specific, like in those caverns, for them to find as well. And that's more my question. It's one thing to like know generally, oh, there's fuel hidden here. It's another thing to like be aware of exactly where to go to find the stash that these people put aside for you. I'm going in circles in my brain here. But yeah, so like that was my real like main issue was they can't have left it somewhere that's obviously used all the time, or else the faction would know that's where they were going to leave it. And so they had to have done something slightly different than what was expected. Okay. She says they outsmarted us. They can't outsmart the director. Even if we can just get it back online for a few seconds, that's all the time it'll need to take back control. And she says that she knows exactly where the uranium refinery is if they will just give her a map, which leads to them growing rather suspicious of her because she sends them to the uranium refining plant, and the faction is already there by the time they get there. And this turns out to be part and parcel of the faction really thinking ahead and making sure to cover all their bases. They didn't, like, I said in the intro, I'm not sure how much of what happens regarding the faction being one step ahead is simply due to the faction being like, oh, we know how y'all's minds work and what you're going to try, and we're just going to do it first or ruin it first. And how much of it is due to there being like a mole on the inside. It seems like the assumption everybody goes with by the end of the episode is it's a just, you know, anticipating your most obvious next move. And I'm willing to accept that. But I will say, I was sort of wondering if there wasn't a possibility, because like, you know how our team, they all have comms and they are able to sort of like communicate with one another by leaving. I think they can do it if they just leave it on, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like if you leave it on, can the person who is listening hear whoever is speaking in the room that you're in? Because I was wondering if maybe Jenny had a built-in comm, and maybe somebody from the faction was just tuned in and listening to their whole conversation. The fact that Jenny gets replaced by somebody else at the end of the episode, and there's no like particular reveal about that, I think indicates that's not what was going on. But I was pretty suspicious of Jenny as like maybe being a transmitter of some kind at first. I wonder, did anybody who was watching this think that Grace was maybe a bad guy, a member of the faction? Because I'll admit, I sort of wondered if like, she's just such an outlier in the whole way that she operates compared to everybody else. The fact that she was sent to like make good on the mistake of putting Carly in the wrong body, or Marcy, sorry, in a body that was like disabled, and she had sort of made that miscalculation and felt responsible for it. It's the sort of thing that felt like a little bit too good to be true, that they wouldn't just be like, well, sorry, them's the breaks, kid. Like, you didn't get the body that we hoped you would get. And I know that sucks for you and it sucks for our plan, but that's kind of how it goes. And we can't be perfect all the time. And we're just going to ask you to do the best you can and take one for the team by dying and yada, yada, yada. So the fact that she came back to fix this error that she made and take responsibility for that. Maybe it's just because I haven't had a lot of management types in my life that were willing to fess up when they made that kind of mistake. So it seemed very unlikely to me that somebody who didn't have to be in the customer service level, that they would take that on voluntarily. But that was really, more than anything, more than her attitude about everything else, that was why I was sort of thinking that maybe Grace was indeed with the faction. And I didn't want that to be true because it felt too easy to just kind of have somebody be like unlikable and then turn out to be with the bad people. It just seemed really oversimplistic. But I admit that the thought did cross my mind a couple of times. So I don't think that anymore, obviously. But I kind of wondered. And especially when they have the whole thing with her, like, taking the tablet and going into the bathroom. You don't know what she's doing with that. She's typing symbols out. This is all, like, it could be a message to the faction. It could be something to do, like, who knows what. And it turns out that she's programming the, what are they, nanites? Is that what they're called? But you don't know that's what she's doing initially. So the faction arrives at the facility, kills those two dudes. It's really hard to watch Tim McLaren's like old partner be the one who murders these guys. And McLaren and Carly show up. I love Trevor in the car doing the research on the number that this man said he was. And Trevor realizing that everybody in there is faction and kind of like just basically getting his gun out and ready to fucking throw down. Trevor just, he's low-key competence porn for me, honestly. He's so intelligent and he is so like understated with it. And I just really enjoy him. And I know I say every episode how lucky they were to find this actor who's really able to pull off the vibe of somebody way older. But I will say it again, they really are super lucky. I mean, this kid is uncanny. So it turns out, unsurprisingly, that they got here after the uranium had already been removed because the faction knew that they were going to be doing this. And I feel so bad for them, too, because, like, they really think that they're kind of ahead of the curve here. And the way that the faction keeps sort of mocking them, like, yeah, oh, you're really smart. We never thought you would do this. Like, it's just sort of insulting. Look, they're trying, okay, guys? Like, you're very formidable. Congratulations. Let them have their attempts here. And so that this is when they go back and they sort of like low-key accuse Grace of selling them out and or setting them up. One or the other, both, whatever. To which she just says, oh, that is really insulting, which I appreciated the simplicity of that answer. Just like, really? Come on. This is just common sense that they would expect you to go there next. I don't need to tell them anything because that's a very clear next move. So the next thing that they have to do is try and get a warhead from a naval facility. And they play it the whole time like they're trying to get a nuclear warhead, I guess. But the way that this goes is sort of confusing. And again, confusing to me, because they need the plutonium, right? That is in like a nuclear warhead. But that's not actually what they take, or do they take both? Because whatever it is, they wind up like having an alternative bomb that they use against the faction in that tunnel. And then there's also the one that is used to fuel the director. So I got a little bit mixed up in this part too. I'm sorry, guys, to be covering an episode that I feel like I misunderstood a lot of. I do my best, and this doesn't happen often, but every now and then it does, and I do feel like a real, like, goof. But it just wasn't totally clear to me, because it felt like McLaren says to them at the end, like, there is no way we would have been allowed to take a nuclear warhead out of a facility. And I kind of was like, well, no, I wouldn't think so, but I was willing to suspend my disbelief for the sake of the show. But then it seems like that facility was, or like that plutonium was acquired for the director. And so I'm not clear, like, if he's mocking them for thinking they could take that, why, or is he pretending that they weren't able to get it and mocking them for thinking that they would have been able to, when they absolutely were, and he's just trying to throw them off and make it like that shit didn't happen? Is that what it is? That he pretends they were unsuccessful so that in the future they don't know that they were successful? They have to pretend they failed? Is that what it is? Did I get it? Ugh. The thing about the whole future thing, it just throws so many, like, wild cards into the mix that I don't really, like, I lose track of how it would work, you know, when you're trying to keep hold of a thread of how something would actually go versus what they would hear about how it would go, how they would react and when they would react and how that would even work out. It's a bit of a mess. So this is all going on. There's a whole thing with Philip and Jenny and him basically being like, I just hope that you suffer. And I was like, honestly, same. And there's also the subplot of McLaren's wife who's pregnant. It's not really much. She's just struggling with, she's obviously been infected and she is pregnant and she had that miscarriage once. And she had that scare with there being, you know, the placenta issue, the detached placenta, I think was what was the scare, that he was able to, like, fix with the prescription from the future. And really it just winds up being that she, I think, is realizing how much she misses him. You know, the two of them aren't actually officially back together. He's trying to be supportive with her being pregnant, and I think she's accepting his support due to the fact that she's pregnant and she knows that she just can't handle this without him. But it's more of a necessity thing. And this episode, I feel like what's happening is her really appreciating in a different way how reliable and supportive he is, and trusting him again, or trying to, you know. And then there's David. And David, I already talked about, like, you know, the man that he saw, who I thought was dead. It turns out the guy had just passed out. But David, when he's talking to this guy the first time, and the guy doesn't recognize him, David pulls his mask down and keeps it down as this man coughs all over the food that is being served to all these other people. Y'all, I can't handle it. This type of thing plays so much more differently on this side of COVID. And it is just harrowing. I hate it. Oh, I hate it so much. So, yeah. David winds up miraculously not getting infected. He must be immune to it, is what Marcy says later. And I was just waiting, you know, for him to come down with something. But I'm grateful that he didn't. Like, I didn't want to watch him get sick, you know. So he's sort of also just waiting around for Marcy to show up, and finally goes home when he seems to sort of realize, like, either she's not coming or she, like, really, David, what you should be thinking is, half the world is sick right now, and she works at a hospital. Maybe she's not coming. Like, dude. And he does go home, and eventually she shows up to check on him. So what's going on with Marcy is she's sort of like watching over. There's the one doctor I can't remember the doctor's name, that is sick. And they're trying to save her because she would be like a valuable asset. And then there's Jenny, and Jenny is like, Marcy's treating her as the control subject, and she's testing out different like things that she's hoping will help on the doctor, and basically like just sort of letting Jenny suffer. And Jenny calls her a hypocrite for it, and it's just like, oh, you're whining about these people when you're willing to just let me die. And Marcy rightfully just says, you did this to yourself. And I was like, amen, sister. Correct answer. Marcy is just coming through with the common sense this episode, and I'm here for it. So this is when Grace does her weird, like, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. It's no big deal. And I love how, like, incredibly, she acts so irritated at the fact that Marcy would dare to ask her where she's going when she is absolutely going to do something shady, and Marcy has every right to be suspicious of you. She's doing that thing that people who get caught cheating do, where they are just like, I can't believe you'd say I was cheating. Okay, yeah, but you were, though. Stop it. Psychologically, it's effective. That's why they do it. But yeah, it's really frustrating to watch her do precisely the thing that Marcy is afraid of. And Marcy doesn't see her. She's not keeping a good enough eye on her. She's aware that something isn't right because of how long she, like, you know, Grace goes into the bathroom with the tablet and takes way too long. And eventually she comes out and injects Jenny with the nanites that she has reprogrammed. And she really thinks that she's doing Jenny a favor. And what's so amazing is that it turns out this moment is just so good. Jenny begins gasping for air and looking really panicked. And when Marcy comes over and is like, what did you do? Grace doesn't even do anything to try and help this woman. She just yells, oh shit, Marcy. She just does this and doesn't try to like fix anything. And when Marcy's like, what did you fucking do? She shouldn't be having respiratory issues at this stage. Grace says, you didn't trust me. I had no choice. I instructed the nanites to pull the virus into red blood cells where it can't survive. She should be getting better. And Marcy says the faction predicted that countermeasure. The virus blocks red blood cells' ability to carry oxygen. She's suffocating. And she tells Grace to turn them off. And Grace says deactivating the nanites will be flushing them down the drain. And I'm like, dude, for somebody who allegedly is so logical, you're acting like a fucking imbecile right now. Yeah, you're flushing them down the drain. You programmed them incorrectly. But she can't, like, wrap her head around that. So she's just like, the idea, the mere idea that she did this wrong, and so we should just undo it entirely. It's like she can't even process that reality. I had no patience for this. Plus the fact that she's like, you didn't trust me. I had no choice. This, Grace, is why we didn't trust you. You are not good at this. She's literally dying right now and will suffocate to death in a minute. Like literally 60 seconds more of this, and she would die. And finally, Grace turns around and like undoes the programming and is like shaking her head the whole time. Like, no, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, what's ridiculous is that you suck and you really think that you're the authority on all of this. And later on, when Marcy gets the cure and administers it to the doctor first, and she administers it to Jenny, if I'm not mistaken, because Jenny winds up being taken over by a non-faction person. Grace yells at her, just admit you hate me. And I'm like, bitch, these two women were down for the count. They went through way worse than you. You are such a brat. You are a whiny, entitled little bitch, and I don't know how you survived in the future, where allegedly resources are much harder to come by and life in general is more difficult, when you can't deal with being third, receiving a cure for this disease. You're fine. You're fine. It'll be fine. Shut up. Just admit you hate me. Well, I mean, she can. I'm sure she would say she hates you if she felt like it. She's not going to hide that. But that's not the issue. It's that you are, out of the three of them, the least in need. So, yeah, she's one of those people that just pretends that she's all about logic, but absolutely isn't. And I appreciate her. Like, did you not think that the faction was going to factor in nanites? And Grace says, I had to because you didn't trust me. And she just says, why should I? And here comes a thing that I thought was going to go more of somewhere than it does. She says, why should I? Grace says, you're alive because of me and perfectly healthy. And she says, am I? When you reset me, you left out some things. What'd you leave out, Grace? And she says, this is what you want to talk about when we're dying? And she says, I'm not dying. You are. And I was like, that's a damn good point. And that is where the scene ends. And then we come back later, and they apparently haven't had this conversation. And I was kind of mad about it. I felt like we were really going to get a moment of Marcy getting to confront the person who did this shit to her. And she doesn't, and I feel a little tiny bit ripped off. Or else the conversation happened off camera, and we're going to hear about it later. I don't get that impression, though. I don't know. But, like, I really wanted to have it out. I wanted to see if there was anything that Grace could do, or and probably there isn't. But, you know, I just wanted to have the conversation. And I feel frustrated on Marcy's behalf that she starts to really get in some good jabs there, and then it's sort of taken away from her. So, just trying to find the next scene. Okay, so then we're in the tunnel. Yeah, because Trevor is off by himself. So that has to be what it was, right? They pretend to have failed to get the nuclear warhead in order to make it seem to the faction like they aren't a threat in that respect at all. So they're carrying like a dummy warhead. And let's see, of course we knew you'd try something like this when you didn't get the uranium. Don't beat yourself up. You're a good team and we need numbers. We should be working together. And they've taken the warhead away and they're like, you know, bringing it. There's like a trolley that they put it on that they're rolling it away. Philip says something here about the future we came from. You all died in the collapse of 41. And this guy says, why can't I wrap my head around that? And McLaren says, why am I not surprised? I thought that was interesting. Why does he say it like that? Why am I not surprised? Is it him trying to be like, y'all are obviously not too smart? Because I wasn't sure. It felt like that's kind of what he said. But yeah, this dude says, all right, well, thanks for the plutonium. We'll make sure to put it to good use. And they're walking away. And McLaren says, plutonium? Do you think we brought a nuclear warhead here? I thought you said they were watching all of our communications. And this is when Philip says there was a typo in my Admiral Donahue email that may have thrown them off. When I wrote Mark 45 warhead instead of, what was that? Oh, Mark 46, because the 45 was nuclear. That makes total sense, except the Mark 45 was decommissioned in 1976 on a Wednesday. Why is this so specific? Is it just for fun? Never in a million years could we get a nuclear warhead from a U.S. naval station. Your friends walked away with a conventional Mark 46 anti-submarine warhead. Totally different. So he's saying that as we're watching Trevor activate the plutonium warhead, I am assuming. I guess this is part of the confusion as well, because he activates it. And I don't really understand what that does. Is it the explosion itself that powers the director? That can't be right. What? Because he says, Carly, I think they're far enough away now. Carly detonates the submarine bomb, and that goes off. It doesn't look like there are too many casualties. You would really think that would have collapsed the tunnel, but whatever. And they all get behind the trolley that they were using as protection as they have this shootout, and then they all go running the hell out of there. And McLaren is chasing after his old partner. Yeah, Trevor says device is in place and activated. See, this is what I'm confused by. Why is it activated? I thought they were leaving it to be found. Help. But just as McLaren is about to shoot his ex-partner, the guy gets taken over by a new person. And this is happening at the same time as Jenny is being taken over. I think the doctor isn't faction, right? I thought we saw one other person, but I guess it's just his partner. Is it Ford and Jenny? But yeah, he says it worked. The director's back up and running. The cure has been sent to the 21st. The encrypted beacon on the device was activated. Oh, encrypted beacon? Is that what Trevor activated? Almost the moment the power to the director was cut off. It took some time for us to find and recover it, but we got to it without them knowing. Okay, I thought he activated the bomb. This is why I'm all confused. I got it. Even when we broke through, it was only capable of powering the director for 3 seconds. Enough time for the director to reroute the power to itself through the network, cut off the faction's access to the reactor, and design the cure, and win the war. 3 seconds, guys. That was how much time that took. Reminder, he just said 3 seconds. Carly asks how many faction are still here, and he says, we really have no idea how many were sent into the frame. And he says the doctor won't have a tell for all of them. I remember that I learned what the word tell is. It was something longitude, latitude, if I'm not mistaken, for figuring out exactly where they are going to be. But yeah, so wild success. And this essentially total cure, which works really quickly, is delivered to the 21st and saves millions of lives. I'm not sure how many people actually died before the cure was distributed, but it's just one of those things that, God, don't you wish, y'all? Don't you wish that it was like this? And there's an odd moment where Carly is on the phone and she is trying to get through to Jeffrey. Or not, Jeffrey's the baby, right? What's her husband's name? And she can't get him on the phone. And she's like starting to cry because she's so concerned that something has happened. And I've said before that I'm not huge on this actress, but I will say that this moment where she can't get through, she really acted her ass off. That like low level panic that she's just barely in control of. It like that came through. I felt it. And it's one of those things that like, unless you've lived through that kind of moment where you really think something's happened, you don't know how awful a feeling that is. And the only choice you have is to try and keep it together for as long as possible, because you have to get to the point where you find out for sure, yes or no. Yeah, the whole thing is just when she gets home and it turns out that they're both okay. I feel like what is supposed to happen is I see that she really loves and needs her family and wants to make things work. And I just gotta say, and I've said it already, but I gotta say it every episode that they do this, I am not going to forgive her husband who beat her. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I don't know if the show thinks that I'm going to get over that and forget it, but I'm not. Whether he was drunk doesn't matter. Getting drunk doesn't suddenly make you a wife beater when you're not. People try and act like that, and it's not true. It simply lowers inhibitions on actions that you would have taken and would have had the self-control to stop. But the impulse would have been there. That's it. So there's this like thing that seems to be suggested that he's like turned over a new leaf and is a different, better person. And I can't really buy that. And I'm somebody who tries to like embrace that people can change for the better. But there are some things in life that I don't believe you really get to like demand a second chance about. And beating your spouse is one of them. I'm not going to apologize for having a hard line, you're an asshole policy about that. So that whole thing, it's just a one of those moments where I'm just like, I don't know if I'm misreading the way that's played, but I feel really like icky and weird about it. I don't know, there's almost like something to the fact that he is behaving differently too since Carly was taken over by a traveler that seems to suggest that like Carly has been instrumental in him being a better person. And I never like the implication that like the way a woman in that relationship behaves is relevant at all to the man's behavior. And I know that's like a bit of a stretch, but it's just the whole thing just feels so weird to me that I can't help but be like kind of paranoid about it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we have like the montage of everybody going home and either checking on the people that they love or fixing them. Like McLaren gives his wife a injection. It's kind of funny too, because like every time you see people getting injected on these shows, nobody like swabs the area with alcohol or anything first. It always just looks like Ike. And Carly gives her husband the cure because he's like really sick, obviously not doing well. Marcy goes and checks on David, who is doing okay. And David says something about how he couldn't stay away because she's like, you could have gotten exposed to this virus out there. And he's like, oh, I was for sure. And he says something about how he can't help himself, that he just has to be able to help. And that he sort of realized he has that in common with her, even though with him, what he does is a lot less flashy. And I kind of liked that because it's true. He just sees that there are people who like need help and he can't help that his urge is just, well, somebody needs help. I can give that help. Why would I go home? What? Why? No. So she just leaves him though. And he's sitting there on the couch looking very like forlorn. So she comes back to like the base, says she's checking on everybody and how they're feeling. They're all doing better. I had forgotten like how bad it was for Trevor and Philip. They were both really sick. They set up treatment centers to disseminate the antiviral en masse. And Jenny 3.0 is coordinating the deliveries. So Boyd, that's the name of the other doctor. Marcy gets pulled in and she asks Boyd, how are you feeling? Like shit, but I'll live. Fucking Grace, I'll also live. Thanks for asking. We fucking know you will. Shut up. Nobody cares, Grace. I still haven't heard from the other two members of my team, but I'm hoping. And then we get a knock. And outside is a little boy and Trevor. And I'm real confused about this. I'm not sure if the little boy is meant to be one of the members of her crew, if the little boy is a messenger, why Trevor is out there. I feel like I was supposed to get something from that ending, and I didn't, and I don't know if that's because I missed it, or whether it's meant to be like a mysterious cliffhanger. I feel like I missed something. And I just don't know if that's me or not. I don't know. Miss T says she feels the same on Carly's ex. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because, there's just, we got to draw the line somewhere here. And Miss T says, I don't know, I felt confused too. Okay, good. Just as long, I don't mind feeling confused if I know that other people also felt that way. I just don't want to miss an obvious thing that people were like, oh, I was so excited for you to get to this moment. And meanwhile, I'm like, what? I don't want to ruin it, I already had moments of almost ruining this episode because I didn't get what was going on. But I feel better about it now. It's weird that I went back. I rewatched the wrong part though, I was rewatching the part where Grace explains and where Trevor goes and plants it. I didn't rewatch the part where Ford explains what they did. And that's the part where it really the instructions are clear and make sense. And I should have just rewatched that. But at least this time around I got it. So that's good. All right, so I got to wrap up, but thank you again very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. Thank you to Miss T for being in the chat, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.